Let's begin with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his word and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. This is the 19th reading from the Torah, and it's called Terumah. And in Exodus 25:2, the Lord commanded Moses to tell the sons of Israel to take a contribution for me. The word translated as contribution is terumah, and which is the name of this Torah portion, terumah. Okay, terumah is a word with no real English equivalent, I guess. In the Torah, terumah refers to a certain type of offering dedicated to the temple, like a tithe or a first fruits offering, something like that. In Exodus 25, the contribution is for the building of the holy place, of a holy place. This Torah reading is occupied with the instructions. I mean, it's just the entire Torah portion is all about the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and all of its furnishings. And if you've stayed with us very long at all, you know that I did a long study on that. It's all on YouTube, by the way. You can find that on YouTube, where I did a study on everything in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and the significance of it. Why? Because God doesn't do anything without a reason. Okay, there are no coincidences with God. Everything that He does is for a purpose. Today I want to explore this word terumah and the concept of contribution or giving. At the end of the previous Torah reading, Moses had ascended up to the mountain and on Mount Sinai, and he entered into this fire. That took some guts, I think, to enter into a mountain that's on fire up there. And this cloud, and it was resting on top of Mount Sinai. You can see this picture right now, okay? And it's black up there. It is to this day. That's not a cloud covering. It's black, left over from 3,500 years ago. Moses went up there. He ascended into the presence of God. Imagine finding a hill on top of which God was waiting. To come into the blessed presence of the Almighty, all you had to do was climb the hill. What about that? Think how eager you would be to hurry up there and all those slopes and climbing up, and imagine the spiritual elevation that you would feel and enjoy as you climbed closer and closer to the King. Now, metaphorically, such a hill does exist. It's the hill of generosity. The more we give of ourselves and our resources to God's work, the higher we climb, and the closer we draw toward Him as we align our priorities with His and our energies with God. We experience a spiritual ascent. Now, in Exodus 25. To the Lord commanded Moses, he said, tell the sons of Israel to take a contribution or a terumah for me. Now, Rashi explains that the word terumah implies separating a portion of one's resources for a higher purpose. The root of the word terumah is the Hebrew word rum, resh vav mem sofit, which means to uplift something given as terumah to the Lord. It's lifted up. It's raised above the mundane, and it's elevated for a godly purpose. There are actually something called a heave offering that meant you lifted it up and you waved it before the Lord. Okay? The implication is that one who gives a gift of terumah to the Lord is himself lifted up. And by giving of our resources to God, we spiritually elevate ourselves. The one who gives to the work of the Lord is like a person who climbs even higher into the presence of God. Every word of the Torah is significant. In Exodus 25 to the Torah, literally, it says that the sons of Israel were to take a contribution. Now, seems like a contradiction. How do you take a contribution? You know, normally if you take, you think of that as with the guy with the mask and a gun, he's going to take a contribution from you, right? Okay, so, it's not exactly. A person making a donation does not take the gift. The verse would make more sense if he would tell the sons of Israel to, what? Give a contribution, right? So, why did he command the Israelites to take a contribution? Well, by contributing to God's work, a person is actually receiving more than he is giving. Okay? By giving to God, a person is receiving more than they are giving. Because remember that part where God says, "You give to me, and I'll shovel back with you." His shovel is a lot bigger than ours. Though he gives from his own material resources, he receives in turn enormous spiritual benefit. Therefore, one who gives to the Lord, to the work of the Lord, is actually taking a blessing from the Lord. Did you get that? You give something to the Lord, actually you're taking one of his blessings. So that's what we're talking about. Take that contribution. This can be compared to the concept of investing. Now, a certain man decided to purchase stock in a promising business startup. His foolish friends criticized him. They asked, "Why are you giving all your money away?" Several years later, the value of the stock had increased greatly. The man sold the stock and received a large return on that investment. So too, when one gives to the kingdom of heaven, his contribution is like an investment that will reap eternal reward for him. Now, many years ago, little rabbi trail, little personal experience here. I was approached by some guy, and he was representing some dude from Arkansas, of all places, wanting me to, he was just saying anybody that contribute to $5,000, and this was in 1970. Okay, well, in 1970, I was making the princely sum of $115 per month. Yeah, okay. And I did have a place to stay. I had 3 meals, and I, marched around in uniform and did all of those kind of things. But that's what they paid me, $115 a month. And so what happened then is this guy was, talking about it, and so there's no way that I could contribute $5,000. That was more than I made in a whole year, So, but they were actually looking for a $10,000 investment, and it was in this guy that they were representing was some guy named Sam Walton. Now, if I had had the resources to come up with $10,000, my goodness, I couldn't contribute. No, otherwise I probably wouldn't be here right now, okay? But had I made that investment of $10,000, you know what it would be worth today? $148 million. That's a pretty good return on the investment. I don't know how many, it split like 257 times. It's amazing stuff. But you just never know about these investments. It might have also been that investing in that guy over there in Africa that wants you to invest in some scheme or something like that. I don't know. You have to be careful with investments. So you just never know. Yeshua told a parable about 3 different types of investors. One investor invested generously, and he received a generous return. Another invested modestly, and he invested a modest return. If any of you know about investing, you know that there are, you can invest aggressively and risk your principal a little bit more. And I should have Rod be teaching this part of it, because that's what he does for a living. And so there's aggressive investing, there's moderate investing, and then there are those who only buy government bonds, okay, which is not investing at all. But so the third guy, he bought all government bonds. He didn't invest at all. He received no return, and he even lost the original capital with which he had been entrusted. The apostle Paul said that that the person who gives sparingly will receive sparingly, but a person who gives generously will receive generously. A true giver is not motivated to give simply because he anticipates reaping a prosperous return on his investment. A generous person gives to the work of the kingdom because his heart desires to give. He loves God, and he wants to do everything he can to further the work of God on earth. And before we shift over to that next slide, or afterwards, it doesn't matter. I was reading. I saw something that came across my desk a couple of days ago about a guy. This lady, I think it was talking about how that she had met at an airport. She was at the cab stand, and this cab came up to her. He's next in line, and she noticed that this cab was spotless on the outside. It was nice and clean and pretty. And the cab driver got up out of the car, came around to her, and she noticed that his shirt was all nice, pressed, creased, starched. Pants, same thing, just very clean. And he was friendly. He gave her a card, and he says, while I put your luggage in the back, would you read my mission statement? And he had this card. And his mission statement on this card was to take his passenger to their appointed place in the most direct, cheapest, and safest way possible. In that simple little mission statement. And so she got into the cab, and he said, "Could I offer you some coffee?" Okay, some people here would have just jumped right at that. Coffee, sure. I've got a thermos here. And she said, "No, I'd really rather have a soft drink." Just thinking, this is a cab. This is a taxi. And he says, "Sure, I have Coke. I have Diet Coke, and I have lassi." And of course, I did not know what lassi was. I had to look it up. First I looked at it, Lassi. They misspelled lassie. I was looking for the dog. No, lassi. You know what that? Does anyone here know what lassi is? I had to look it up. It's a drink. It's a yogurt type drink. Okay, and a kind of a yogurty buttermilk type drink, and you can put fruit in it and make it really nice. It's kind of that sweet sour, that sort of. It's a South Asian drink, okay? And so she said, "Well, I took a lassi because I didn't know what it was." So adventurous soul. Well, as she's talking to this guy, she says, "Well, how? This is a lot different." And he says, "Oh yes, he said I got to looking around at all of my other cab drivers here, and how they complain all the time, and I looked at that, and I decided, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be that guy. I want to give back something of myself, and I want to." He says, "So I looked at all those guys, and I said, they're just ducks. Have you ever been around ducks? They quack all the time, and they just seem like they're complaining all the time." He said, "I decided I wanted to be an eagle, and I wanted to fly above all of that." And he said, "So I started cleaning up my car. I got it cleaned up," and she had noted that the inside of the car was just as spotless as the outside was. And so if you've ever driven in taxi cabs, just in any major city of the world, it just doesn't happen that way, not in a normal taxi cab. These guys don't care. They just drive. And so anyway, she got to talking to him, and she asked him, he said, "Well, how long have you been doing this?" And he said, "Oh, just about 2 years." And she said, well, I assume that since you're still doing it, it's been profitable for you. And he said, oh, yes. He said, he says, the first year, I doubled my income. And he said, this year, I expect to quadruple my income. And that is all because of return customers. They call specifically for him. And so here is a guy that he was, he didn't want to be the duck. He wanted to be the eagle. But I'm telling you, I'm just kind of making this, changing it around a little bit. This guy was a giver. Okay, he was one of these kind that, he was just not going to drive and take the money. He was going to give back. He was going to do something above and beyond. And what did it do? It was very profitable for him. People asked for it. They want something like that. He was a good servant. And so that is what, a little story, I got to thinking that, that's what a generous spirit does. Now, in Exodus 25:2, the Lord asked Moses to collect donations only from those donors who desired to give. From every man whose heart moves him, you shall raise my contribution. The collection was supposed to be a free will contribution, not imposed tax or not even a tithe, okay? This was just strictly above and beyond, and it was something that people wanted to do. Now, tithes are important, but terumah, in this case, is supposed to be given simply from the heart. Just right here. That's where it comes from. Now, if you know the story, they had to come to the point where they said Moses had to tell the people, stop, enough, look here. We've piled this stuff so high. We got silver and we got gold and we've got all this cloth and everything. It's stacked up so much, we don't even have a warehouse that can hold it, So that's how the people wanted to serve. This can be compared to a husband and wife who loved their son and wanted to see him succeed. So, they deplete all of their savings to get him through college. So maybe they got him through Harvard or Yale or even better, Texas A&M, and so they gave up everything that they had for help their son get a good start on life. And in the same way, a person who loves God would be eager to do all he can to see God's work succeed. When he invests in the kingdom, he does not regret the loss. He sees an opportunity to fulfill his hopes. A true giver wants to honor his father by giving back from the resources bestowed on him. The true giver does not think of his money and his resources as belonging to him. Now, a lot of people do, okay? A lot of people think, well, this is my money. Why should I give it to the Lord? Why should I give it to God? Why should I give to that church or that synagogue or whatever? But, a true, generous spirit gives the money because why? He knows it's not really his anyway, He regards all that he has as belonging to the Lord in the first place. Now, this can, you can compare this to a wealthy man who was going on a journey, but before he left, he entrusted his neighbor with a sack of money for safekeeping. Must have been a good neighbor, okay? But on returning from the journey, he asked for the sack of money back. Well, what about that? Do you think he got it back? The neighbor, sure, gave him his money back. He felt no ill will at having to give this money back to his friend because he knew that he was only a custodian of it. It wasn't his money to begin with. So why should he care that he had to give it back to his neighbor? But some people, they'll somehow figure out, well, he let me have it for this length of time. I should have part of it to keep, from keeping it safe and so forth. But no, you just give it back to the guy that originally had it. In the same way, we should regard all that we have as belonging to God. It was his. So often as we talk about giving, we seem to think that that means opening up your wallet and seeing what's in there and giving $1 or $2 or $3 or $100 or whatever. But no, it's much more than that. I think we should be looking at giving as something well beyond monetary value, okay? Now, look at it in terms of our time, our effort, our thoughts, our talent, our emotions, our prayer time, many other aspects that we do, every day of, that in our life. From time to time, people ask me, well, what can I do for, for Tree of Life? Well, I say, what is the most important thing you can do for us? Yeah, part of the question, okay, they're asking, about money. Is kind of what they're asking. How much do I need to contribute or whatever? I tell them, no. What is more important than what you put in that green box back there is how much time you spend praying for us. Okay, that is much more valuable use of your time than whatever it was however long it took you to make that money to put into that box, okay? And those of you that have been here a long time know that, okay, I talk about money. I think this is the third time in 6 years that I've had a sermon on giving, okay? I just don't talk about it that much. Because why? Because we're at a point where people understand it, and we make our bills each month, okay, and that's adequate. And you notice I'm driving an old pickup truck out there that needs head gaskets on it. I'm not driving a BMW, so no, it's good. It's all good. So people ask me if they can pray. Often, somebody that will ask me, says, well, I can't really do much because I can't, I'm old or this or that and the other. And I said, you know what the best thing you could do? You could, pray for us. That is by far the most important thing. Spend time in prayer. Pray for the synagogue. Pray for the people in the synagogue. Pray for your rabbi. Okay? Because we all need it. I need the prayer. You certainly need the practice. Goodness. If you can't think of things to pray for, then let me give you some suggestions. I think we need, seriously, I'm getting down to serious now. We need to pray for our Supreme Court of the United States. Serious business. They're currently deliberating on several issues that can literally mean life or death for millions of unborn babies. For the time being, the court has allowed to stand the Texas law banning abortions at 6 weeks. The heartbeat, the heartbeat law that we have. It's a very unique law because it has no enforcement mechanism in it. But it allows anyone in the state to sue an abortionist. That I've never heard of a law before like that. It's very innovative. And the Supreme Court said, well, since it's not the state that is imposing this, but it's through the legal system by just a regular person, I guess we'll just let it stand because there's nothing against it. And so they did. Now, on December 1st of 2021, the Supreme Court heard a Mississippi case that some would say could overturn Roe v. Wade. That was the abortion case from 1973. And so we really, they've heard the case, and they'll probably make a decision sometime between now and June, or at the end of their term in June. So we really need to pray that God would get a hold of their hearts and their minds, and that they would uphold that Mississippi law that would ban all abortions no matter what after 15 weeks, okay? So, and many of you know that last week, Justice Stephen Breyer announced his retirement from the court. If you follow the news, he was reliably a liberal, okay? And so this will allow the current administration to nominate a replacement. Some of the names that I've heard that are brought forward do not bode well for religious freedom. I'm not going to go into names because nothing that we can do other than pray about it is going to make any difference. One potential nominee was so anti-religious when she was arguing a case that involved religious freedoms and religious liberties that even Justice Kagan, she is ultra-liberal, you know, she's a Jewish lady, but very, very, very liberal. Even she was amazed. She says that she was amazed, and not in a good way, okay? Telling this lady, she says, I'm amazed at your line of argument. Which, and by the way, when they voted on this case, the Supreme Court voted 9-0 to against this woman that now they're trying to put on the Supreme Court. So that that kind of tells you, when even Justice Kagan says, this is so far away from what the Constitution allows that I couldn't even consider voting against this. And look on the international scene. Now that's ripe for prayer. Okay. Russia looks like it wants to invade the Ukraine. North Korea started testing the rockets again. China wants to take over Taiwan. Israel, one of the most vaxxed and boosted countries in the world, continues to struggle with COVID. It's just crazy. So remember those international things. Pray for those things. Make yourself a little list. I used to keep, when I was driving into work every day, with an hour and a half drive to come to Houston, I had a list on my visor, and I could look up there and be reminded of people that I needed to pray for, okay? Now, I do not pray with my eyes closed, just so you know, okay? But keep something handy so that you can be reminded. Put it on a mirror or something, that people you can pray for. Another investment we can make, that people can make, is service. Now, right now at Tree of Life, we need people who can teach children during the service. We've got a few. And after the service, from during the Hebrew and the Torah club classes, okay? Each person here understands how important it is that for the parents and the grandparents to be able to enjoy the adult classes and interaction. Therefore, each of us should share the responsibility with the entire congregation to raise up our youth. As much as I hated that saying, it takes a village to raise children. Okay, no, but it does. It is nice to have a synagogue of good people that are contributing to the upraising of our kids. We would do this on a rotational basis so that you would not be, stuck, out there someplace and not be able to come in here and just enjoy these wonderful drashes, okay? There's service opportunities outside of Tree of Life that don't even involve us. There's prison ministry. There's volunteer work at local charities. The one right here in Katy Christian Ministries, is a wonderful organization from what I can tell. And that's what giving is all about, okay, really and truly. Now, we already know what Paul said about sowing sparingly and reaping sparingly. And, out in my garden, I see it every year. You knew I was going to get some kind of a gardening thing into my sermon, right? Okay, just like I normally have maps. Out in my garden, I see this every year. If I plant lots of seeds in a particular bed, I will see a lot of produce. I have tried that square foot gardening method, where you're planting, like in 1 square foot, you're planting 12 plants of beans, like, for instance, okay? And just every 4 inches. Well, really, you should space them out. But what it does, it grows them up there, and it blocks out a lot of weeds. But there are limits to that. But if you sow a lot of seeds, those of you that know the pepper crop that I had last year, you're looking forward to my pepper crop again this year, because I planted way too many pepper plants. I've got about 36 of them started okay already this year. Yes, indeed, And, and so actually, I do that. I plant a lot. I just find out that, it's one of those deals. You plant a lot, you get a lot, generally. Now, but if I'm stingy with what I'm planting, and I said, well, look, I've got these seeds that I got from so-and-so, and I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to plant just one of them. And, that plant will come up and it'll be up there, and then next thing you know, a cutworm will come along and take that thing out. Or whatever, grasshoppers or a thing. So why? You plant a lot of them because there's a lot of critters out there that would try to, want to cut it down. So if I don't plant a lot of seed, I don't get a lot of produce. That's just the way it is. But at the same time, I have other things. It's not just planting. Those of you that have gardens, you know that you have to go in there and you prepare the bed before you put the seeds in it. I've got onions up about this tall right now that I guess they are. I don't know. I covered up with about a half a bale of hay before this freeze. So I got to go out there and see if they survived. I'm sure they will. But before I did that, what did I do? I went through there and kind of stirred the soil up a little bit, and I dug trenches, and I poured a certain kind of fertilizer in those trenches that are good for onions. Covered them up, and then I planted the onions, not in the trench of the fertilizer, but just right to the side of it, because you don't want to burn your onions, And so it took me a day or two to do all of those things that I planted, a couple of 200 or 300 onion plants, something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. But it takes time and effort. You have to put a lot of water in and maybe fertilizer, and you go out there, and I spend a lot of time on my knees in my garden, okay? It's not because I pray that much. It's because I'm picking weeds. I pray a little bit too, okay? And it takes work to do all of that kind of stuff. And if you take that into the spiritual kingdom, what does it say? What is the best thing that you can have in the garden is what? The gardener's shadow. That's how you know. I go out to my garden a couple of times a day. Even in the wintertime, I'm out there just looking stuff over. I went out in my garden last year one time, and I went through the garden. Everything would look cool, and I went out and looked at the orchard. And, oh, man, I had the most confused worms you ever saw. These are tomato hookworms, okay? Those great big old green things that are about the big as your little finger? They were on my plum trees. Yeah. And so I disabused them of their error right away, okay? And my plum trees were thankful. So there's just a lot of stuff. You have to pay attention, to look out for signs of disease and for bugs. And that it's like our life. We have to pay attention to what's going on around us. Pay attention to your relationships. Pay attention to your family. Listen to them. Listen to your friends. A lot of times, a lot of the things that I do during the week is listening to people. They'll call up. I don't have a lot of answers. Tell you the truth, if you call me, I probably don't have the answer that you're looking for. But in going and talking it out, listening to a person, maybe inject just a little here or there. At the end of the conversation, people are saying, I think I got it figured out. Thank you. And really didn't do a whole lot. Not only in the congregation, I used to do it in the oil field too. Guys would come and talk about this or that and the other, and in the service, same kind of a thing, just listening. Be a good listener. That in itself is a generous spirit. You got to be on the lookout to look for those the little aphids and the worms that would harm the kingdom of God. and you just correct it when needed, and be encouraging to people always. Now, the next verse that Paul wrote spoke of the attitude of giving. He said in 2 Corinthians 9:7, "Let each one of us give as he's decided in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." All right? Everybody knows that deal. It's preachers preach on that stuff all the time, as they're passing the plate around. You notice we don't pass a plate around here. You just put it in a box, and people told me, says, "Oh, if you'll pass the plate around, you get more money." And we're not going to do that. The box is back there. You know where it's at. Put your money in it. Giving is to be seriously considered. It's not something that you do, flippantly. It's not haphazard. We need to count the cost of our giving. Generally speaking, God does not expect us to give all of our resources or give beyond what we can have to the point that we harm ourselves or harm our families, okay? Now, and so, I've seen people do this. I'm giving it all to the Lord. And then, well, what are your kids going to eat? The Lord will provide. And all that is a way of them trying to look more holy than somebody else. That doesn't impress me a bit. It impresses me, but not in the right way, okay? It's amazing and in the wrong way. God expects us to be good stewards of His time. He expects us to be good stewards of our family, taking good care of them. And so, Paul was saying that, whatever it is that you figure out that you're going to give, okay, it's up to you. Now, you may feel like that you can give this, that, and the other. There have been years where I've been called in by the IRS and audited because they said no one with your income, which was so puny, gives that much. Well, we did, and I proved it to them, and then finally after the third year of being called in, I went back and found another deduction that I hadn't put in, and they owed me another $42, and so that was the end of the the harassment for a while, But they couldn't. They said nobody does that. I said, it's called tithing. Have you ever heard of that? And so Yeshua spoke against the Pharisees who neglected the welfare of parents so that they could make large contributions to the temple fund. What did they call it? It was called korban. Instead of taking care of their families, which was korban, that was the Hebrew word, they will say, well, I'm going to take this and give it to the Lord. Just so that everybody knows I'm giving it to the Lord, And here, good look at what am I doing? And meanwhile, their parent, he was supposed to be taking care of the welfare of his parents. He was their 401k. He was their Social Security plan. And yet he gave it all away. Not good. Don't give money or your time or whatever because somebody puts a guilt trip on you. Wait a minute, what I'm doing today is not a guilt trip now, okay? Or tries to convince you that if you give to their ministry, the Lord is going to just make you rich. You know that I do not teach that at all. If you've been around me enough, you know that I will never teach that. He'll make you rich, but not maybe in this world. He'll make you rich up there. Yes, sir? Okay. Want to quote it? Huh?
Trust me, have faith in me.
Trust me, have faith in me.
10%.
10%.
And I will open up the floodgates of heaven. See for yourself, and I will open up the floodgates of heaven for you.
Uh-huh. There you go. The second part of this verse that Paul has said here is interesting. He said, God loves a cheerful giver. Now, have you ever looked up the Greek word? All of you know I'm not a Greek scholar, okay? I have to use books and stuff to look at this stuff and figure out the words because I'm not a Greek scholar. But the word for cheerful giver is hilaros. Now, how does that sound like? hilarious. A hilarious giver, one that is just so happy to be able to give. It sounds funny, but God loves that hilarious giver, the one that just loves to give. And it's, but just like in the desert around Sinai where God asked for contributions, the people gave so much that they had to just stop it because there were so many people that wanted to give. And so what happened to the ones that were a little bit late on it? They just missed a blessing, didn't they? Yes. Remember the widow that Yeshua highlighted in the temple? He said, watch out for the scribes who act so religious, who like to be seen in pious clothes and to be spoken to respectfully in the marketplace, who take the best seats in the synagogues and place of honor at every dinner, who spend widows' inheritances and pray long prayers to impress others. These are the kind of people who will be condemned above all others. Yeshua sat down opposite the treasury where people came to bring their offerings, and he watched as they came and went. Many people threw in large sums of money, but a poor widow came and put in only 2 coins worth only a fraction of a cent. Yeshua called his disciples over and said, see this lady? She gave more than that pompous rascal over there that was putting in thousands and thousands. She gave more to the kingdom. It'll be blessed more. I always thought of the widow as being an old woman who just, had run out of Social Security, didn't have any sons to take care of her. But, what if it was a young widowed mother? Kind of puts a different perspective on it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. That was a sacrifice for her. Yeshua said it elsewhere like this: given, it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing, will be given into your lap. For whatever measure you measure out will be measured back to you. That's what I said. God's got a bigger measurer than you do. Whatever you do for the Lord, do it because you want to. Do it because it's important to the well-being of the kingdom of God, and as well to your own benefit, to your own well-being. Last of all, serve the Lord with a generous heart of joy, and you will not regret it.